Hello, good morning, and happy Mother's Day to all joining us via Zoom and our Facebook live stream. Welcome to the Center for Enlightenment's exploration of spiritual teachings, Jewels from Jane Elizabeth. Each Sunday will be a free-flowing adventure with teachings by Jane Elizabeth Hart, facilitated by certified Center for Enlightenment teachers. We are working from the self-study lesson found on our website at cfenlightenment.org, and we continue with the self-study lesson titled Third Dimension. Today's topic, Conquering Your Third Dimensional Mind. Greg Brett will be the facilitator for this lesson. Greg is a certified teacher for the Center for Enlightenment and longtime student of Jane Hart, studying with her for over 30 years. Jane is the author of Spiritual Power Tools, Support for Your Soul, master teacher, and founder of the Center for Enlightenment. Today's course will be live streamed via Facebook. A recording will be sent out with the weekly reflections so you can access it anytime. And for those new to this format, your chat icon is located at the bottom of your screen. Just click to view. If you have any technical questions, please reach out to the host or co-host via the chat. In addition to the Sunday courses, there will be a question and answer discussion on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. A link for these sessions will also be posted in the chat. If you are in need of prayer support, please contact us at cfenlightenment.org or just type centerforenlightenment.com. We are active on Facebook and X. Come check us out, share your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. It will also be a great support to like the postings that resonate with you. We also invite you to visit our website at cfenlightenment.org. There you will find additional self-study lessons, talks, videos, or you can search for specific topics to support your expansion in consciousness. So allow yourself to just sit back and just take a deep breath. To begin today's journey with the prescription for spiritual alignment.
Good morning and welcome. Let's align with the truth of our being together. We are aligned with the presence of God within. We are protected by God's love, wisdom, knowledge, and grace. The God consciousness within helps us discover more about who we are. Thank you, God, for the gift of spiritual intuition. And thank you, God, for aligning our conscious, subconscious, and superconscious minds. Thank you for the power of spiritual alignment. Amen. Well, when we say we're aligning ourselves with the truth of our being, what we're really saying is that we're moving beyond the third dimensional mind into our fourth dimensional self, our higher self, our infinite self. But first, we have to conquer that third dimensional mind, master, overcome that third dimensional mind. And so this week, we've been working, if you were with us last week, we were working on quieting the mind. And that's quite an undertaking, but it's a process and it's a gradual process, and we can't expect it to happen all at once. That's just our minds working on us when we think we've got to do it all at once. Just a little every day. So what was your experience like this week? Did you find there was some progress in it? Did you find it difficult? Did you find that you had some kind of assistance from within helping you to quiet your mind? Your mind is your greatest obstacle in moving into the fourth dimensional consciousness soul. Your mind is your biggest obstacle of moving out of the third dimension, because your mind is the third dimension. This is an advanced teaching, so we're going to dive right into the deep end of the pool at the very beginning of this lesson. But the third dimension, the third dimensional reality that you see all around you, that realm of time and space, is your mind. It's the projection of your mind. It is the creation of your mind. And the way to get out of that third dimensional consciousness is to take charge of your mind and quiet it. Overcome it. I say conquer it, but it's the mastery of the third dimensional mind. And there are tools that we use to do this overcoming. Meditation is really where many of us get our start in quieting the mind and experiencing ourselves in our fourth dimensional soul essence. And that moves us out of the third dimension. And then we take that meditation consciousness and we move it into our everyday lives through the observer self, which is always in the background observing what is going on in, you could say, a meditative state, a state of awareness, and seeing what is really happening, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, how we're acting. Another thing that we haven't talked so much about is letting go of outcomes, because the third dimension is the dimension of outcomes. And what do I mean by that? Well, the third dimension is about cause and effect, karma. The third dimension is the realm of time. And in time, there are causes and effects, causes and effects. You decide to do something and then you do it, then you have repercussions, both positive and negative. And so outcomes of our causes that we insert in space and time, those outcomes are those things that keep us stuck in the third dimension. And if we withdraw our attachment to those outcomes, we find ourselves gaining greater and greater peace of mind, freedom, awareness. We're no longer locked in rigidly to trying to get certain outcomes in order to be okay. And one of the great tools in doing this is journaling. Journal what you have been expecting. What kind of outcomes have you been wanting or been afraid of? And journal those out so that you can take a look at them and detach from them. Detaching from outcomes is crucial in moving out of the third dimensional mind, because the third dimension is nothing more than outcomes, cause and effect outcomes. The third dimension is about the fulfillment of your desires and the aversion and the avoidance of negative things. But the fulfillment of your desires has to do with cause, effect, karma, and your desires are always being fulfilled in the third dimensional consciousness. Because you live in the third dimensional desires, you are living in the realm of the opposites, because you get what you want, that's a positive opposite. You don't get what you want, or you get something other than what you want, that's a negative opposite. Either way, you're attached to an outcome in the opposites. And so detachment, disengagement, disentanglement from outcomes is crucial in moving out of the third dimensional mind. There's so many rewards to moving out of the third dimension. We can quiet our minds at will. We become free from being attached to having things go a certain way. We identify with our intuitive mind rather than with our intellect. We're able to experience ourselves in the spaciousness, in the openness of the infinite self, the unlimited self. Turning off our minds is one of the great gifts of moving out of the third dimension. But in an interesting twist, we've got to be able to turn off our minds in order to begin this process of moving out of the third dimensional consciousness. Moving from the third dimensional human self into the identity of the fourth dimensional soul is a long journey of detaching from the world that you're used to and becoming more aware of another world, another reality, another realm, the next level of your awakening to your higher self. It does take time, and you've got to master it step by step. But a busy mind is what keeps you stuck in the third dimension. A busy mind that demands outcomes, that wants certain things and desires certain things to be a certain way. And so you must take charge of your mind. And that's what the video is about at the end of our lesson here. Jane is going to talk about becoming like a sponge, absorbing the fourth dimensional reality and moving beyond the identification with the limited self, moving beyond that stuckness in the third dimension. And you're the only one who can do this for yourself. This is called taking charge of your mind. And so as you move out of your ego mind and into your fourth dimensional infinite self, you begin a process of turning off your mind and going into the silence of your being. And so many people think that silence has to do with the lack of sound, maybe just turning everything off. And that can assist us in developing our experience of the silence. But ultimately, we find out that the silence is just as operative in busy traffic and noise and people's conversations as it is in times of quiet meditation, because the silence is something that's not conditional. It's not conditional even to whether we're sitting in meditation or not, but we develop our ability to experience the silence through meditation and observation. And so the third dimensional mind is the limited self, the human consciousness. And then as you start to do this work, you become more and more aware of the difference vibrationally, energy wise. You begin to notice when you're in your higher self or when you're in your lower self, when you're in your fourth dimensional soul essence or when you're in your third dimensional ego self. You find that you can feel the difference. And one of the ways that I notice that I'm in my third dimensional lower consciousness energetically is that I'm in judgment. And I find that judgment has become increasingly more and more intolerable. One of the things that happens is that you experience more and more of your soul essence, and you really don't want to experience that lower self anymore, being in judgment, being in defensiveness, being in self-righteousness. That limited self that's so rigid. Jane describes the third dimensional self as that part of us that is unable to color outside of the lines that it has given itself. Thinking how limited it is to have to color just within those lines. And we have no access to anything else. But the third dimensional mind that is stuck like that created those lines itself. This is the rigidity, the judgmental thinking, the self-righteousness, the defensiveness. And as I look back over my life, I see my journey of spiritual awakening is a journey of moving out of the limitations of these ego states of consciousness and beginning to tap into the higher energy and vibration of the infinite self, which has a different flavor. And this fundamentally changes your vibrations. You start to clear out the cobwebs in your energy field. Things become brighter. I, a few years ago, had cataract surgery. And what I didn't realize, because I was so used to it, was how dim and how clouded everything was, and how flat and dimensionless it was. And after I had that surgery, I was amazed at how bright and how colors popped and how I could see depth once again. This was analogy. This was an analogy for how I moved out of and am moving out of the third dimensional limited consciousness that sees things in a flat, affectless, dim, cobweb covered kind of experience, and moving into the full experience of my beingness. And you find this as a gradual, it shows up over time, it's a gradual process, and you begin to notice it in different aspects of your life. What you find is that you are becoming rewired. And being rewired means that you have a capacity to carry greater and greater light, to experience more and more vibration and energy. You're getting rewired so that you can actually channel and experience the flow through you, through your beingness of higher vibrations, and you discern things differently. This allows you to become more clear about what's going on with that limited self. Things looked a certain way to me at certain times in my life, but with a greater consciousness and a more expanded awareness, I look back on those things, I see them so differently. you certainly deal with remorse and forgiving yourself and all of that. But really, it's beyond judgment. It's an understanding that that was the limited consciousness I was in. You don't blame your dog for being a dog or a squirrel for being a squirrel. And so you don't beat yourself up for the fact that you were in a limited human consciousness at a certain point of your life when you were acting or seeing things a certain way. This is called discernment. Discernment is so different than judgment. You're able to move into that unlimited aspect of your being and see things from a higher perspective with reconnaissance, with that higher awareness, and you know what really is going on. Whereas, well, in the words of Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. And whatever was going on with us in that past experience, we didn't know what we were doing. We were in a limited consciousness. We take responsibility for it. It isn't licensed to act any which way, but it's an understanding that as we grow, we have a greater and greater capacity to understand. Sometimes I would pray for um, an intellectual understanding of something that happened in my life. And that was very limited in helping me because in the limited consciousness that I've been in my intellect, I can't understand those things. It's the actual expansion into the truth of my being, higher awareness, that makes it not make sense intellectually, because some things just don't make sense intellectually, and they're not supposed to. But moving into an awareness where everything is okay, where there's a sense of, oh, it's it's all part of being, moving into that gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a gradual process that expands us, that moves us into a new awareness. Now, when I really got serious about this spiritual path, I thought it was going to be a slam dunk. I thought it was going to be a quick fix. I thought it would be, I'll do a few things, take a few steps, and then I would see it all and it would be wonderful. But getting to know your whole self in the infinite is a gradual process. It is an experience of finding out more about who you are. And this process includes opening your eyes, removing the veils, and finding out more about the whole being of you, including all the negative stuff, the negative and the positive in the opposites, and then moving beyond both. This takes tremendous desire and a commitment to that desire, and then using your will to back up your commitment to the desire of your heart to know yourself, your whole self, and the truth of your being. The truth is that we've lived so many lifetimes in a very limited awareness. And this time around, we came into this lifetime, you and me, in order to become aware of the truth of our being. And in the process of awakening, moving up the mountain, climbing that mountain, that experience of mountain climbing begins. We begin the process of truly being on the spiritual path, not just doing our karma and paying it off and accumulating more karma, fulfilling desires and doing the dance of the third dimension. But now we're ready to play a higher game, to move into a higher awareness, to experience a real aspect of our being, to fulfill the potential and the essence of who we are. And this has occurred after many lifetimes of developing intellects. Many of us have become smarter and smarter and smarter, thinking that was going to give us the fulfillment of who we are, and we find out that's not true. Others of us don't think we're very smart or have an aversion to that intellect, but even that is not what we're looking for. Jane says, you have to give up the intellect altogether in this video. And she means both the good and the bad, so that you move into the intuitive mind. The intellect, they say, is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. The intellect has its place, but only under the direction of the higher self. When the intuition takes the front seat and the intellect takes the back seat, then the intuition takes charge of the intellect and begins the process of being teachable. Moving into the intuition, the higher self, the fourth dimensional mind, requires humility. It requires an awareness that maybe I'm not smarter than the average bear. Maybe that intellect that I was trying to develop has limitations, or in some cases, realizing that that intellect that I don't think I have much of really isn't my goal after all. And instead, developing that intuitive self of us that truly understands the fourth dimension and experiences itself in that higher soul essence. Something that I've noticed, and I've heard Jane say as well, is that the fourth dimensional consciousness, the intuition, is experienced more as a feeling than as thinking, as we've understood thinking to be intellectually. So if my intuition is activated within me, I might have an awareness and I might be able to put words to it, but it is experienced more as a higher feeling than it is as a bunch of thoughts. And this is a subtle distinction, but maybe it gives a clue so that when you're doing your journal and you're asking for guidance, you're opening yourself up to new awarenesses. You don't expect it to be always point one, point two, point three thoughts. Yes, there are going to be cognitive awarenesses, but you really experience your intuition as feeling, a vibration, and energy, and awareness. And sometimes, and truthfully, you cannot put words to it. It just is. It's just the truth of your being. And that's all that is. It's the now moment. It can't be explained based on past experience or future longing. And you discern this as a different vibration. And I find that when I'm in my judgmental ego self, my intellect, it's a different vibration and I'm not as comfortable anymore in that. I'm in it for maybe a few seconds and I just, I don't want this. And I just let it go. This spiritual experience that we're having together is one of waking up to where we are in consciousness sooner and sooner and sooner. In other words, instead of spending 2 weeks stuck in a judgmental state of consciousness, or 2 months or 2 years, we might spend 2 minutes and then 2 seconds. These things still come up, but your observer self catches them more quickly. Every large leap in consciousness that I've ever experienced, or anybody I know has ever experienced, is preceded by a feeling sense. There's something going on here. Maybe a sense that this just isn't right. I don't want to stay in this feeling. And then letting go of a limitation that then frees us and opens us up into experiencing something higher, something more spacious, a different vibration. And we experience it more as a feeling. And often these leaps in consciousness are triggered by really dreadful circumstances, difficult times. Sometimes it's something that somebody says to you. Maybe there's something that is wanting to come into your consciousness. Jane has talked about this many times, and I've experienced it as well. When there's something that is trying to come into your awareness, your consciousness, there's a part of you that says, I want to tap into this. And there's a discomfort that slows you down and makes you more aware because you can't understand the truth of this next step in your consciousness through your intellect. Jane says in the video, your intellect cannot understand God. Just can't be done. Square peg in a round hole. It just cannot be done. And I got to the point on what I thought was my spiritual journey where I learned more and more and more. And then I finally realized I wasn't getting the results that I really wanted. Jane put it this way in the video: the only way that I was ever going to get to know the infinite was to shut up. The only way I was ever going to get to know the infinite, quiet, just shut up. And that meant being absorbed by the infinite. And this is a powerful video because at the end, it's as if she's leading us through a spiritual process, an experience of being absorbed in the infinite and then absorbing that infinite awareness into us. And don't get hung up in the thought or the explanation. She described it as being a sponge. And maybe you've experienced a natural sponge. You know, many of us here were headquartered in Tarpon Springs, Florida, which is the sponge capital of the world. And they have piles of natural sponges along the docks. And it's not just for the tourists, they really do have these sponges. But she uses the image of a sponge absorbing and being absorbed by that higher fluid energy that is all around and within. And the sponge, what's within the sponge and what's outside of the sponge is all one. You can't separate it. Being absorbed in the infinite, and every atom of your being gets penetrated by this truth of your being and absorbed into it. And so this image of being a sponge and taking this in can only really be experienced. The experience of it can only be experienced in silence, in the silence. And that silence, again, is not the absence of sound. It's not the lack of activity in your life. You get to the point where that silence is always humming. Sounds like a funny statement, silence humming, but it feels like that. That silence is always vibrating, regardless of where you are or what you're doing or what people are doing around you. Moving from the third dimensional, limited mind into the fourth dimensional awareness, absorbing it all like a sponge and being absorbed into it. Jane says you have to get the intellect out of the way for this to happen, because the intellect will not allow you to be absorbed. Just can't be. It's a block, keeps you busy. You cannot understand your unlimited self with your limited mind. Well, then what do? You move into the unlimited, which then understands itself. And I'm not wanting to put too many words into it. It just knows. That's why they call it being. Being's just being. It's not thinking. It's not trying to do something. It just is. Being absorbed. Moving into that higher dimensions. Becoming one with the whole energy of your being. Not being limited anymore. Not being stuck anymore. And once you start to experience this absorption into your consciousness and being absorbed, you move out of the third dimension, as the analogy is just becoming as a sponge. Sponge, just be, just relax, just allow, let it be. And as you are becoming absorbed into the infinite, you see this as an occurrence that's slow but sure. You slowly but surely become more and more open to a new awareness. You begin to quiet your mind. And when your mind tries to take you for a ride, and it will, you recognize that you are the master of your mind. You are the master of your mind, absorbed in your unlimited self. You are no longer a separated self. You are one infinite self. And then, if you got a problem, you don't have to figure it out. You know what to do. You begin to think differently. In a sense, you could say not think at all, but you're aware. So your awareness is experienced differently. You look at life differently. You have a different perspective on things. Jane has many times likened it to the difference between looking at life through a little peephole or a knothole and opening up and seeing everything. It's a different point of view. And in the video we're going to watch, she suggests that you take a look at your Spiritual Power Tools book. Your Spiritual Power Tools book, if you don't have one, you can download it at the Center for Enlightenment website for free. And take a look at the chapters on moving from the third to the fourth dimension, moving from the intellect to the intuition, letting go into the truth of your being. And so let's watch this video together and let Jane take us on a journey. The end of it, feel what she's sharing with you. Don't think about it. And just breathe and let it in and let it be. Let's watch it together.
So, the very first thing you have to do to move out of the third into the fourth is that you have to turn your mind off so that you can get into the silence. And we'll talk more about that. Because a third dimensional person, a human person, identifies with its limited self. And it feels limited. It feels like it is unable to color outside its lines that it's given itself. It doesn't feel infinite. It feels limited. But as you control your mind and you tap into the higher energy, the higher vibration, your vibrations change and you get more clear about this limited self of yours and are able to move into the unlimited self of yours. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And I find so many students that I've taught and worked with throughout the many years that I've been doing this, I have found out that they want quick fixes. This is the world of quick fixes. And you have to move out of quick fixes and understand this is a process, because you have to understand your whole self in God, in the infinite, not in the third dimensional limited self. So there's a process going on. The process of opening your eyes, wanting to know more about who you are, and acknowledging that you've lived many lifetimes, and this time you want to know the truth of your being. And the process begins. The mountain gets climbed. One of the things a human being that we do is work on our intelligence. We have to read everything, or we're interested in how smart we are. How smart we are, smarter than the average bear. Or, oh gee, I'm not smart enough. I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. Well, you have to give up the intellect altogether because you have to develop the intuitive mind. And the intuitive mind then takes charge of the intellectual mind. But that is a process that you are going through. You have to be teachable. You have to be teachable. You have to develop that intuitive self of yours, because that intuitive self intuits and understands the fourth dimension. It realizes, oh, there's another dimension here. Wow, I feel a different vibration. I feel something. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel this other vibration. There's another something trying to come to me, trying to come into my consciousness. I want to tap into it. I want to understand. My intellect can't understand God. Believe me, I tried. I read all the books I could possibly find that I thought would give me that insight. No. I finally closed my books and said, the only way I'm going to know you or know the infinite is to shut up and be absorbed by the infinite. Be absorbed. Absorbed. Did you hear me? Absorbed by the infinite. You must be absorbed by it. It must be penetrating every atom of your body, every atom throughout your toes, your head, your fingernails. You have to absorb the infinite. And that is exactly what you're doing when you're moving from the third to the fourth. You're beginning to absorb the infinite. Oh, I'm telling you something extremely, extremely important. You start to absorb, like a sponge, the infinite. But you have to get your intellect out of the way, because the intellect will not allow you to be absorbed, because it wants to understand itself in its limited ways, the unlimited. Do you hear me? The limited can't understand the unlimited. It can only move into the unlimited to understand itself. You must be absorbed. And that is exactly what happens when you move into the higher dimension of self. You become absorbed in the infinite. It becomes the very essence of your beingness. It absorbs you and you absorb it. It becomes one with the whole. You become one with the whole. The whole energy of this planet. It permeates your every cell, every inch of you. And once it begins to permeate and you begin to absorb more and more of the God consciousness, you are moving out of the limited consciousness into this other consciousness. But it takes the willingness to be a sponge. A sponge, yes, a sponge. In other words, you have to just, what does a sponge do? It just relaxes and allows itself to be absorbed in the water of life. You become this sponge and you are absorbed in the water of life. You see, it's like taking yourself as a sponge. Let's pretend you're a sponge. And you drop yourself into the infinite. And you absorb yourself in the infinite. And then it becomes slowly but surely more conscious of the infinite in you. You see, what I am saying to you is of the utmost importance to your soul. I'm just not talking, well, wonder if this happens or that happens. You become absorbed When you meditate, you allow yourself to be absorbed in the infinite. You become able to experience what the infinite is, and you understand the infinite from the tip of your toes to the top of your head. Allow yourself to be absorbed. Shut your mind up, because the mind can't go into the infinite because it's so finite. So what I am telling you with every inch of my beingness is watch that mind. Watch it like a hawk, because you don't want it to take you on a ride. You want to let it be, because you want to absorb in the infinite. Sponge, be a sponge. Let it be. All around you, the infinite is. Always has been. But you've been finite. And finite never moves into the next dimension of being, where you are master of your mind. And you are absorbed in the unlimited self. You are no longer a separated self. You are a one infinite self. I remember when I began putting these spiritual power tools together. I wrote these out of the very essence of my being. I discovered them as I became more absorbed, more and more absorbed. And I had to think differently. I had to look at life differently. I had to experience more than I'd ever had to experience and understand from a different point of view, an intuitive understanding. This book is my life. And I mean that from my very essence of being. This book is my life. I put every inch of myself in this book. I put my God consciousness in this book. So when you're reading it, when you're looking at it, when you're observing what's here, it's laced with the essence of the Absolute. And if you get that, and truly get that, you will understand why I put this together and how important it is for you. This is my life. This is what I learned. And I'm still learning in a different place, in a different world than you live in. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that they were helping me from another dimension. You see, there's lots of help out there. Look over page 17. We're going to continue working on what's the difference between the third and fourth, because this is not just something I can do in 20 minutes. Nope. Bye-bye. I'll see you later.
Well, that was an experience. And that's a little taste of the experience of the silence, which is moving from the third into the fourth dimension. That's the experience of the silence that occurs when we take charge of our minds. And that higher intuitive mind is experienced more as a feeling than it is a bunch of thoughts. And as we let go into that feeling, we become absorbed into our higher self. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience of this on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. You see the link in the chat room. And it's our Thursday night question and answer support group. It's for everybody. You can participate any way you want to, whether you want to share something, ask a question, or just listen. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern. The link is in the chat room. It's also found on the website. And we also invite you to support the Center for Enlightenment as we do this work in helping humanity to awaken to the truth of their being. So until Thursday or until next Sunday, bye for now.